Hey, ya shining crazy diamonds and spiritual entrepreneurs and veterans of 1,000 psychic wars. It is I, Miguel, your pompatus of Gnosis and that host of that strange podcast you sometimes listen to. And here I am with an announcement about the content you are about to receive for those about to rock. And yes, you will soon see April DeConick's presentation on Gnostic archons, politics, and stargates. From the second Astro Gnosis, Meet the Archons. It's a really amazing presentation and education, and many of you who already have access to the replay have seen it, but see it again, more relevant than ever, and you'll find new nuggets of that old-time Gnosis. Why am I showing this? Well, there's two reasons, and one of them is promotional. I want to remind you once again that all three Astro Gnosis conferences are available for one price, and it's a truly amazing deal if you ask me. You get Astro Gnosis 1, which is Stargates and UFOs, Astro Gnosis 2, Meet the Archons, and the last one, Astro Gnosis 3, Sophia and Simulated Realities. And it's more than 30 hours of high-octane Gnosis that includes presentations, Q&A panels, rituals, and all sort of amazing stuffy stuff, all for the price of one. And for some reason in October, the sales have just been blowing up, so I thought I'd remind you because it doesn't get better than this. The second reason actually has to do with some chats I've had with Chris Knowles at the conference that we had at the Theosophical Society, and in some of his chats and groups at his Secret Sun Institute, where he had wanted me to make April's talk public. And why is that? Well, Chris, for a long time has been doing some excellent research. He's been ramping it up recently, and that's the idea of the stars and stargates and all this other stuff that is affecting both our geopolitical world, the elections, and so much. And Chris has been unlocking so many amazing secrets with this work with the stars. And he's certainly right. I think in his latest or last blog post, he talked about how this feature or this tool, if you would, shouldn't be called astrology, certainly not astronomy, not even astrotheology. Should be called something else. Should be called maybe a sort of theurgy, if you would. And the truth is that the establishment has been using this tool against us for thousands of years, and we need to change our perception and see the stars and interact with the stars differently. And this is nothing new. I mean, this is something that the ancients knew about very well. Chris calls it a form of theurgy. Scholar John Lundwall calls it analogical thinking. Others have called it the law of correspondence and other names. But that's the idea that the stars in the material world are always interacting with each other. It's interactive. The two dimensions are always bleeding into each other and experiencing each other and affecting each other. We can affect the stars. And this is more than, let's say, predicting if it's going to rain when you get married or what your personality is. This is, if you understand these rituals and how to look at the stars, then you can transform yourself. You can literally expand your consciousness and your power down here on Earth as you begin to interact with the stars, and you can enter these star portals and stargates into the final frontier, if you would. And I know this is hard to understand today, but again, we definitely need a paradigm change on how we see the stars, because again, they've been doing it for thousands of years, and the ancients certainly knew about this. As above, so below, Hermes Trismegisto said. So this talk by April certainly really helps out. If you get the replay for Astro Gnosis, the last one, you'll even see speakers like Ola Wolny and Maja Dau. They really turn the whole astrology upside down. They deconstruct the way we see the stars, and they provide new forms of magic and divination and so forth that will really help the transformation of those who want to wake up. Definitely check it out. Also, too, in his last book, Steven Snyder, his last book on Stanley Kubrick, he talks about how the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey is not what you think. It is actually one long-ass Neoplatonic Gnostic theurgy exercise on how a human can become divine, can go up the ladders into the stars and transform themselves. And I think Stephen is 100% right. He makes a good argument in his book about how Stanley Kubrick knew these secrets like the Gnostics, Hermeticists, and Neoplatonists. So again, think about a new way of seeing the stars, or not even seeing them, but experiencing them. As I say on this show, we got to take the inward journey. We got to touch some grass, and don't look at the stars, but experience them. Experience them. So that's really all I got today. I don't want to waste any more of your day. Kronos is a bit stingy, giving out his powers to all. So let's get to this talk with April DeConick, and I hope you enjoy. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being yourself, your true self, here in the desert of the real. Hello and goodbye as always.
So good to be here today. Thank you for that beautiful presentation. I think you've covered so much that will make what I have to say, I think, a lot easier for people to kind of digest and understand. So today, know thyself, know thy enemy. What the Archons can tell us about Gnostic politics. Some of this, I think, Miguel was hinting at in his presentation. So I want to start today with a story that some of you may know, maybe all of you may know, about Paul McCartney. There's a story that Paul tells about one of the worst things that happened to him. And that was discovering the meaning of life and not being able to remember it. He recalls being with Bob Dylan in a hotel room and getting very high. And in that moment, he says that he cracked the code. He knew the meaning of life absolutely. And he couldn't wait to tell everybody about it. So he grabs a piece of paper and he writes it down. And the next morning, he finds this piece of paper and he looks at it. And it simply says, there are 7 levels. To his surprise, he couldn't figure out what the heck he meant. And I'm here to tell you that while Paul McCartney may not have known what it meant, we here know better. And the 7 levels as the meaning of life, well, that's what we're going to talk about today. In the academy, Gnostic studies have rarely focused on the Archons, except perhaps their chief, the arrogant god of the biblical story who mistakenly thinks he's the supreme deity. But the others who make up the hebdomad, that is the 7, lurk in the background, seemingly less important. They haunt the myths as rebellious divinities attached to the planets and the celestial realms, as co-conspirators who help mold Adam, as fates who control the destiny of souls. They were significant enough that Gnostic initiates in some groups spent years memorizing their names and their astral locations so that when they died, they could force the Archons to release their souls from the cycle of birth and death in which they had been incarcerated. At this conference, we are taking a closer look at the Archons, who they are, and why they are integral to the Gnostic systems. In fact, I propose that the very identity of the Gnostic was constructed in contrast to them. For the Gnostics to know themselves as children of the transcendent God meant that they had to know that they were detained on earth by God's enemies. And they had to know what to do to be released from their captivity. To know themselves, they had to know their enemies. So my agenda today, I have 4 items that I would like to wrap our heads around. 4 questions. What were the Gnostics trying to say about themselves and their world in terms of using this archontic language and system? How did Gnostics actually imagine the astral world? What did it look like in antiquity? What did their soul rituals look like? And here we're going to get into some therapy. And were finally the Gnostics nihilists? Okay, so those are some of the questions that I want to address today. So my first question, what were the Gnostics trying to say about themselves and their world? So ancient Gnostic mythologies were all created on what I call the kinship theory of religion. And it's important for us to understand this before we get too much further in, because it helps us understand who the Gnostics thought they were. Gnostic mythologies are very different from other religious mythologies in antiquity, because the stories insist that we are biologically related to a transcendent God beyond our universe. In this kinship theory of religion, we are understood to be children of this God, not as adopted children, but because our bodies actually contain God DNA. Now, the ancient Gnostics, of course, did not know about DNA, so they called this God aspect the spirit, the spiritual seed or pneumatic seed, the spark of light, or some such kind of a word like this. And it was a word that differentiated this aspect of the person from the soul or the psyche. And in antiquity, the soul is the psyche. It's the human mind, our ability to be able to think, to reason, our emotive self. This is what the psyche is in antiquity, or the soul. So keep that in mind as we go. Today we might not find this kinship theory of religion to be too alarming, but in antiquity, this was paramount to treason, because it crossed the line that kept gods and humans separate species. In ancient Mediterranean religions, gods relate to their human creations as masters to slaves, or as kings to vassals, as patrons to clients. They are supreme and all-powerful and usually capricious. Humans were meant to serve them and be loyal to them. That's why they were created. Temples were built to house the gods and to feed the gods. Worship was established to praise the gods like kings and to keep them satisfied with offerings. Governors and laws were established to enact the will of the gods. And any person who threatened the superiority of the gods by thinking too much of themselves committed the crime known as hubris, or arrogance. If you committed hubris, the gods' anger would not only strike you down, but mow down your city too. Hubris caused famines, plagues, natural disasters, and wars. So personal hubris had big communal consequences. I have written extensively on this countercultural aspect of Gnosticism at length, so I will not say more about it here. I just note that this kinship theory of religion was developed by people who flipped ancient religion on its head. They did so because their lives as colonized people did not seem to them to reflect the going explanations for theodicy, that we suffer because we are sinful, or that we have done the gods wrong. The Gnostics felt that they suffered no matter what they did, whether they worshiped the gods or not, whether they sinned or not. So they looked for another explanation to the problem of evil, which they experienced firsthand every day of their lives in their destitute poverty, in their constriction into the Roman army, in the brutal military crackdowns on Jews in Alexandria, Palestine, and Syria, in their excessive taxing, in contracting diseases that were incurable, and so forth. The Gnostics said, enough is enough. They wanted a metaphysical order that made sense of their everyday experiences. They explored the option that our suffering may have a different cause. And if they could figure it out, they hoped they would be able to alleviate it. Hang on. Back to this one. This is why they began talking about a previously unknown transcendent God who is the source of all life, before the universe was created by fallen angels or archons who mucked it all up. This is also why Plotinus, the father of Neoplatonism, tells us that the Gnostics who attended his seminars said that they made soul journeys to the transcendent God. They only knew him, and came back to earth to both transformed and perfected, empowered to help alleviate the sufferings of the poor and sick in society, often using the magical healing arts. The best analogy to them that we might have today are to bodhisattvas, who are enlightened and believed to possess great magical power. Bodhisattvas delay their entry into paradise in order to stay on earth to help others. These are the best analogy I can make to ancient Gnostics. Okay, my next question, how did Gnostics imagine the astral world? While we don't know all the many paths to the transcendent God that the different Gnostic groups taught, we do know the path that the Ophians taught, because Origen, the church father in the 3rd century, has left us with the complete package. We learn from Origen that the Ophians had an astral diagram that contained the names of all the archons, the sounds they make, and their planetary locations. Origen was able to get hold of a copy of this diagram, which he describes in great detail. From the map, he also copies the 7 prayers that the initiates used as they journeyed from one astral plane to the next. Essentially, we have the entire astral ritual the Ophians used because of Origen's work called Against Celsus, where he talks about this. So are you ready to learn it? Yeah. All right. Let's begin by reviewing the astral world as the ancient people in general understood it. Okay, so first we're dealing with a geocentric universe. The Earth, you will notice, here is at the center of the universe, not the sun. We have 7 planets going around. I don't have these in any order. I just stuck them on there. But you'll notice that the sun is considered a planet, and also the moon as well, part of this planetary system rotating around the Earth. The Gnostics envisioned planetary spheres as distinct astral locations ruled by particular archons. The planets in the Roman world were identified already with various Greek gods. So I have these listed for you here on the side so you can see Saturn. We have Cronus, Jupiter was Zeus, Mars is Aries, the Sun is Apollo, Venus is Aphrodite, Mercury, Hermes, and the Moon is Artemis. So these Greek gods were already associated with these planets. This is the world that the Gnostics are in. The human psyche was thought to take on its shape when it followed this path. The idea was that the psyche, the soul, existed in this realm of the Milky Way, and that at birth it dropped down through the planetary spheres and entered a body. As it comes down through these spheres, it takes on its various inclinations, if you will, as it descends. So the soul gets certain things. It gets its ability to reason. It gets its ability to procreate, to desire. It gets its ability to grow and mature. All of these things, think of them as kind of attachments or shapings of the soul that happens as it ascends down through here. And so your horoscope matters. How the planets are all aligned is going to matter in terms of what kind of soul you're going to eventually have here on Earth. When you die, the opposite happens. Your soul leaves the body, separates, goes back up through these spheres, and the goal is to get back there to the Milky Way when the whole process starts over again. So that was the sort of understanding of the astral world that the ancient people had. This is not just the Gnostics. This is ancient people in general. So in this ancient architecture, then, I have here a diagram that lets you show that the stars are positioned, as a zodiac beltway, here. Let's see here that rotates around the Earth. That's the zodiac beltway. And what else do we have here? There are 12 constellations or stars that in that beltway. You can see them here. They have particular locations, and they understood these constellations to literally be gates. And the reason for this is that the sun journeys around this journeys around the ecliptic annually is what I'm trying to get out annually, and it goes through each one of these gates at a certain time during the year and in the constellation. And so the sun path through these stargates is known as the ecliptic. It's sometimes called in our ancient texts the middle, and because the constellations were understood literally to be gates that the sun is going through, that meant that they were also guarded by sentries or guardians. And in the ancient astrology, the stargates are guarded by the planetary gods. So Cronus, Zeus, Aphrodite, and so on were the guards of these various gates. Now, the Gnostics shared this structure, but they re-signified the gods as archons. The different Gnostic groups have different names for these archons. The names and their memorizations by initiates were part of each Gnostic group's trade secrets. But today I want to discuss with you the Ophian nomenclature as an example of this type of resignification. So let's take a look at this chart that I created from the information that Origen left us. So let's just take a look at what we can learn here. First of all, these are the names of the 7 archons that the Ophians know about. Okay, we have those names in other sources as well, so we have some verification that indeed these were the names that this particular group used. They also have angel names. Notice they don't just have their kind of I guess archonic name, but they also have angel names. This suggests to us that, again, the archons are some sort of fallen angels. They're actually given those names. Here is their appearance. They're like the lion-headed, bull-headed, serpentine, the countenance of an eagle, a bare-faced, dog-faced, ass-faced. And Miguel already talked about the fact that these actually are very much align with the idea in antiquity that both the Greeks and the Egyptians had, that associate the gods with various animals. Okay, and so you can see how close this association is with these figures. Look at this. I mean, many of them align right across. And I wonder if Tote and the baboon is actually, that's what they were thinking about when they were thinking about a bear face, like a baboon sort of face. But you can kind of see the similarities there. Here's the planet that the archon ruled, the various archon ruled. And then these were their gates that they were associated with. So Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius, Jupiter, Pisces, and Sagittarius, and so on and so forth down the road. So this is the information that we get from Origin. And once you chart it, I mean, you get a pretty good idea of who they thought the archons were in this scheme. So what all can we conclude from this material? What we can conclude is that a few things. According to these Ophians, the planets and the gates of the zodiac are ruled not by the Greek gods, but by fallen Jewish angels or archons. The Ophian archons are rebellious angels, including their chief, who is this traditional biblical god, who here is called Yeldabaoth. This name is a reference to the warrior epithet for Yahweh, the Lord of the armies, that we find in the Bible. And it's some kind of a blend of that phrase. The names of the seven are all derived from the study of Jewish scripture and Egyptian magical books, in which magicians had long-standing practice of Hebraicizing names of deities and spells, probably to give it an air of antiquity. The Ophians relied on these materials to create the names of the seven in order to authenticate their new cosmic structure as old and scriptural. The Ophians were essentially saying, this has always been the structure of the heavens, and these have always been the names of the planetary rulers. It just took us, the Gnostics, to figure it out by studying and correctly interpreting the scriptures, reading the ancient magical art books, and figuring out the grimoires, and where we've discovered the truth that no one else ever saw. So you see how that works? It's very cool. At least I think it's cool. Okay. The bottom line is that the Gnostics turned all the traditional religions upside down. They said, look, the biblical God, he's just this bad angel. He's this angel of Yahweh who's rebellious and arrogant and jealous, just like it says in the Bible. We're just reading it literally. And by doing this, they were, I'm thinking that Okay. By doing this, they were setting themselves apart from both Jewish, and this is important, also Christian groups that worship the biblical God Yahweh. So they were after anybody who was worth worshiping Yahweh. And some Gnostics, like the author of the Gospel of Judas, additionally identified the archons with the 12 Christian apostles. Think about that for a minute. So this provides yet another layer of heavy critique of Yahweh worshiping Christians who considered themselves heirs to the 12 apostles, those we know today as the first Catholics. But here is the important point to keep in mind. Gnostics didn't just take down groups that worshiped Yahweh. By re-signifying all the planetary deities as equally rebellious and haughty angels, the Gnostics also pulled the plug on the cultural norms that demanded civic worship of Greek, Roman, and Egyptian gods. All the gods were nothing more than angels pretending to be gods and tricking us so that they can keep our souls in their system and keep receiving our offerings and praise. Plotinus tells us in the Aeneads that the Gnostics who attended his seminars also took down Plato. Okay? These guys are so countercultural, saying that Plato never was able to comprehend the transcendent God. According to Plato, the final goal of the soul is to return to the stars and fly around the zodiac with the gods, not get out of the system. That's cool. All right. All of this is, I'm sorry, my PowerPoint that I had that was going to bring in these things individually is not doing that on this particular setup. So, but I'm not using my own computer. So I'm a little off, but we'll catch up. All this is to say that the resignification of the planetary gods as these rebellious angels did political work that cut deep into normativity and critiqued the very fabric by which ancient society was held together. But there is more, and here finally we get to this beautiful slide here. We not only have Origen's account of the Ophians, but we also have an ancient gem called the Bonner gem that was probably once set in a ring and worn by an Ophian initiate. So really the gem, if you can even see my ring, is about that size. Okay. And it had been set in a ring like this. And on the front of the gem is carved, I think this is still it. On the front of the gem is carved this lion-headed god. You can see his big lion head there, right? And he's identified by two titles. On this side, we have Ariel. That means lion of God. And on this side, we have his name, Yaldabaoth, okay? So we've got kind of two things going on there. This gem shows us what the ancient Gnostics thought an archon looked like. Okay, so this is super interesting. In fact, it's our only known picture of an actual archon as the Gnostics perceived them. He is this very ferocious, lion-headed man, just as the Gnostic texts describe him. So we don't have any surprise there. But what we see here that we don't see described in our text is his dress and his stance. And he is dressed in Roman garb as a Roman warrior. Okay? And even more, he carries a royal scepter, which was associated with Egyptian kings. This particular type of staff here, as you see in his hand, is called a sectum. And these staffs had straight shafts, and then they had kind of these rounded off but pointed ends. And you can see the artisan here just took the A and used it for the top of the staff, which is it was just an artistic, kind of fun thing to do, I think. This particular staff symbolized the ancient power of the king. And also shows up in funeral rites as a type of wand of power that certain officials use as they prepare the deceased for the death journey. In addition, you can see that Yaldabaoth is carrying a basket. You think, gosh, what the heck is he carrying a basket for? I mean, we think a Little Red Riding Hood or something, right? But in antiquity, these baskets are often found in Egyptian tombs. And because they're associated with agriculture and used to sow seeds. So this imagery actually fits with the Ophians' understanding of Yaldabaoth as the deity who is sowing souls as seeds. Okay, so this imagery comes up in the texts and so forth. On the reverse, okay, hang on. On the reverse side, you can see that what we have are the 7, the names of the 7. So this is an abbreviation for Yaldabaoth because it couldn't fit it on. And then we have Iao, and the rest are all in order. These last two names are actually flipped from the list we find in Origin, but nonetheless are still the same names. These names, what I find super interesting is that they're on the back of the gemstone. So I, as the wearer, am the only one that can see it through the setting, right? So that's the hidden knowledge. Nobody else can see the names. Only I know the names of the 7. When we look at this amulet, then I think it's very striking with its immediate critique of kingship during Roman colonization. Oh, there are the names for you. Yeah, there I am. When we look at this, we see that what the imagery is suggesting to us is that the kings and the governors in Egypt, as Roman colonizers, they were believed to have their authority to rule from a rebellious angel. That's what the Gnostics were saying. They were saying, you Hellenistic rulers get your authority from the Archons, from the rebellious angels. Your divine mandate to rule Egypt is a farce. This is really powerful social critique from people who were oppressed within a system that they felt was stacked against them. What did Gnostic groups think ought to be done? The Gnostics were unlike the Jewish apocalyptic groups, which often took up arms against Rome only to be massacred. Since the Archons were ultimately responsible for the world order and their personal suffering within it, Gnostics developed religious systems and ritual practices to subdue the astral archons in their chamber. They believed that each person had to be liberated from their control and their twisted system of justice. We can think of this in terms of psychological transference. They projected the trauma that they felt socially and politically onto the divine realm where they felt it could be resolved ritually. Gnostic groups created therapeutic rituals designed to manage their suffering and achieve personal liberation. So what did these psychological rituals look like? Again, I turn to the Ophian practices because Origin has left us with the whole 9 yards. The idea behind this is that let's see, hang on. In Origen's testimony, Origen is refuting another philosopher who's named Celsus. Celsus tells us that he had firsthand interactions with the Ophian Gnostics. So this is super important, right? This is not secondhand information that this Roman philosopher was receiving around the year 170. But he claims that he had firsthand interactions with these guys. Origen calls them Ophians. Celsus calls them Gnostics and Christians. So just kind of so you know the nomenclature there. But Celsus says that their priest actually showed him their liturgical handbooks and that he attended an initiation and he records what happened at the initiation for us. He says that the initiates go up into the archontic realms and some become lions, some become bulls, others serpents, eagles, bears, or dogs. So you've seen those names before. What are those associated with? Yeah, that's the archon shape. So that suggests to me that these guys were doing gradated initiations where you would go up into one level, become a lion when you met the lion-headed guy and overcame him, and come back down. And then the next time you'd go up and you'd encounter the bear or whatever the next level was until you went through all 7 of them. So I think there was probably 7 grades in this particular one. I also think they probably did these rituals at very specific times. There's evidence in other texts that this astrology was super important, so that when the Archon was in a particular stargate where was probably when they were going to do that. So when Jupiter is in, his stargate is when they went up to meet, whatever the Archon was that ruled that great gate. But we'll see more of that in a minute. Okay. Scholars have been unable to determine the actual path of the astral journey because up until very recently, there has been little understanding of ancient astrology or interest in it. Astrology has not been taken seriously by academics who try very, very, very hard to argue that Jews, Christians, and even Gnostics had little to do with it. But this simply reflects their own modern biases against astrology. I have found that once you take astrology in antiquity seriously, the solution to the Ophian astral path is actually very simple. And I have published an article on this back it goes 2013. It relies on common ancient knowledge of the journey of the soul through the stargates that the Middle Platonists and the Neo-Pythagoreans were discussing, and which the Mithraic rites also used to conduct astral journeys for their initiates. So I want to take a look at a couple of slides here to show you here. This is a very poor picture, and I apologize, but I don't have access to anything better. This comes from a Mithraic, a Mithraeum, and I'm going to project this on top of it so that you can see what this is. Does anybody recognize what this is here? That's a zodiac, right? And they have marked at the top a spot, and they have marked at the bottom a spot. These are entrance and exit gates to the zodiac wheel. Okay. And the idea here was that the soul enters at this gate and then is going to go around to descend down into the body through those particular gates. Those are known as the diurnal gates. Those are the ones in which the sun Leo is present, the day gates. The nocturnal gates is when you ascend back up to the heavens, when the soul leaves the body here and ascends back up to the heavens and exits at Cancer. These are the nocturnal gates. All right. So everybody see that? Got it where we're going here? Okay. Numenius, and here I've diagrammed this, and I'm sorry, the diagrams flipped from the previous slide, but nonetheless, the information's correct. Numenius is a Neo-Pythagorean Middle Platonist philosopher around 150. And we have a text of his called On the Cave of the Nymphs. And in that, it's not from he didn't write that. Porphyry wrote it. But anyway, Porphyry's discussing Numenius in here. And this is the pathway that Numenius is talking about. It's the exact same pathway that we just saw the Mithraic rites were using as well. Numenius, the philosopher, talks about the descent of the soul coming down through through these particular diurnal gates, and then at death, it leaves the body and goes up through this pathway in order to get out there. Okay, same pathway. This is exactly the same pathway that the Ophian diagram uses, and we know that because Origen gives us these prayers that we're going to go through one by one, and you're going to see how this works out. But it's the exact same pathway. And what we've done is we have now placed, instead of the gods, we now have the archons there in the center. So I'll go back here so you can see. I guess I didn't have it on here. But anyway, now we have the archons in the center there. Okay. So the idea is, we came in the world this way, we go out the world this way. So this out the world this way is the path that they're teaching their initiates. And that's the path that the soul, that they're going to take each initiate through for each level to show them how to get out of here. Okay? The order of the 7 prayers that the Ophrians use to subdue each of the archons matches this path that the Mithraic rites were using, as well as Numenius. The idea behind this is that as the human psyche falls from the Milky Way through the astral planes and into the body, it's shaped by the rulers of the planets that it passes through. And in the Greco-Roman sources, we find several lists of characteristics and abilities that the different planetary rulers give to the psyche as it passes through their realms. None of them match completely, but nevertheless, if we look carefully at each of the Ophian prayers, we can determine 3 things about the psyche. And we're going to look at each one of these prayers, depending on how our time. Yeah, I think we'll be able to do it. We learn from these prayers what each archon did to debilitate the psyche. We learn how the Ophians went about remedying the debilitation. And we learn what magical objects they use to vanquish their trauma and provide psychological protection. We learn from Origen that they perform these rites for catharsis, to purify the soul and heal it. We learn that they use percussive sounds, made popping and echo noises, used effigies of demons, which were probably these amulet rings and so forth, and images, and other remedies, including vestments, clothing, headgear, numerology, stones, plants, and roots. Their astro journeys start out, so this is how the initiation goes, with a prayer that's said by a priest who they call the Father. He takes white oil, some kind of white oil that they had, that they said was from the tree of life, and they smear it on the forehead of a initiate who's laying down. And they're laying down because they're simulating the death journey here. Like, this is what's going to happen to you when you die. So this is how the soul is going to separate from the body. They believe that this anointing ritual was what separated the soul out from the body. And they call this ceremony the seal. That's just what it's called. They believed that it separated the soul from the body. They were simulating this death journey. In these ceremonies, the initiates were being taught how to ascend along this path that I already showed you, along the zodiac, so that their soul, when they died, could avoid being snatched up by the archons and driven back down into a body. Okay, that's what they were trying to do. The rite was all about escaping the fate of debilitated souls which face this path of descent and birth and death again, because they can be shoved back into the body. They wanted to prove to the archons that they had purified their psyches and could no longer be retained by them. So let's have a closer look at these prayers that Origen tells us that they used. And again, he gets these directly from this diagram that he has and that he's examining. These are all my own translations. I found that the translations that are out there really didn't understand what was going on, and so they were real quirky. But here we go. So I greet the solitary king, the bond of blindness, the reckless forgetting, the first power. I am guarded by the spirit of Pronoia and Sophia. Thence I am set forth pure, already a part of the light of the Son and the Father. May grace be with me. Yes, Father, may it be with me. So this is the first prayer that is being now told to the archon, the first archon that they meet. And this particular archon happens to be, I should have put this back. Whoop. On our ascent, is here, Capricorn, Saturn is the Yaldabaoth, okay? So this is the one that we're meeting first, and that's the one that we're talking to. Okay? And what do we learn? What is it that we learn from this prayer? We learn that Yaldabaoth is being greeted as the one who's blinded our souls and who's made us forget. Okay? So he's the one that clouds our mind with forgetfulness, so we don't remember our origins, where we came from, and we remain lost. The remedy, we are probably taught in Gnostic catechism that we are children of Pronoia Sophia, that we're from the light realm, that we don't belong to Yaldabaoth, but we belong to Sophia. And so that's what we kind of reveal here. And we have some kind of magic sign or seal of Pronoia Sophia that we are showing the Archon at this particular level. This thwarts the Archon. This is magic power that he has to release us. I like to think about these prayers and these signs that we're showing them like going to the VIP booth at the game. You know, you don't get into that level unless you got the right ticket, right? And otherwise you get sent away. So you have to have the right ticket to get through the gate. And that's what is going on in this prayer. Okay, the second one is also to Yaldabaoth, and this is super interesting, but Yaldabaoth rules those two gates that you first have to go through in that ascent when you go up. So let's go back to that picture and we can see that here. Notice there I went into Capricorn. When I go to Aquarius, Saturn is the ruler of Aquarius. So Yaldabaoth, I have to greet again. Okay, I have to talk to him again. He's the ruler of the second gate. So here, look, I greet you first and seventh, born to rule with audacity, Yaldabaoth. As a ruling logos of pure mind, as a perfect work for the Son and the Father by the imprint of the seal bearing the symbol of life, opening your cosmic gate that was shut forever. As a free man, I passed your authority again. May grace be with me. Yes, Father, may it be with me. And so here again, we learn now that Yaldabaoth also clouds the mind with audacity, that the soul becomes domineering, tyrannical, egotistical. And the remedy for that is to become mindful, right? I'm becoming a ruling logos. This means a person of reason. I'm ruling my logos by being a reasonable person, rational person. My mind is clear. And sorry, I was trying to get this light. There we go. So I've become mindful so that the soul functions by relying on reason to control its narcissism. So they're teaching people to do these practices, guys. I mean, this is, not just like, oh yeah, they said a few words. These people are training. This is soul work that they're doing. This is psychological work that they're doing before they're allowed to actually go on these journeys. And again, I think this journey probably was happening only once a year when Saturn was in Aquarius. And that's when they would say, okay, everybody who's ready for this one, we're going to do you now. The sign is the seal of life. All right, next. The third prayer is to Iao. Here, I greet you, the Archon, from whom the mysteries of the Son and the Father are concealed. Iao, the second Lord shining in the night and the first Lord of death. As part of the innocent one, wearing already my own beard as a symbol, I am prepared to go past your sovereignty, since by the living word I have overpowered that which was born from you. Grace be with me, Father, may it be with me. And you can see how these little liturgical endings here are the same in each of these prayers. Here, what we can see happening is Iao makes the soul childish and immature so that it's run by its emotion and desires. And the remedy here is being dispassionate and to act like an adult. That's why you've got the beard. And, that's the stage of the adult stage. The sign of the beard. I think we have time to do at least one more. So the fourth prayer is to Sabaoth on Mars. He's the Mars guy, and at the Aries gate, the archon of the fifth power, Commander Sabaoth, defender of the law of your creation, which is being destroyed by grace. By a mightier pentad, let me go past, since you see the symbol not open to attack by your craft. I am protected by the image of the imprint, since your body is destroyed by the pentad. May grace be with thee. Yes, Father, may it be with me. Here we learn that Sabaoth has trapped the soul in a legal system of sin and judgment. And so the remedy here is to refuse to follow Sabaoth's law, which is the Jewish law, and instead follow the superior pentad, the law of the transcendent God. Here the pentad is, Pentateuch is the Jewish law, right? Don't follow that one. We have the pentad, which is the law of the superior God. I don't know what that law was. They never tell us in the sources that we have, because we don't have any Ophian sources that are written by the Ophians. So no Ophian sources are in the Nag Hammadi materials. There's references to the Ophian mythology, but we don't actually have the Ophian group there. Or I should say we have the Ophian mythology these guys are also part of. Okay, I'm just going to zippy by these other ones here and take you here to some final words about things that we can conclude from this. When all this evidence points to is the fact that the Gnostics created their identity as knowers of the transcendent God and this astral path home, not as a romantic story, but as heavy political critique entangled with psychological remedy. Their mythologies and rituals reflect their attempts to remediate the psychological trauma they endured as colonized people. They experienced suffering that was on such a massive scale that they could no longer abide by the cultural norms that relied on the divine mandate of the Roman rulers and the justice of the gods. They refused to participate in the civic religion because they believed that the gods who ruled this world from their astral planes were nothing more than fallen angels who had damaged the human psyche and put into play an unfair legal system to control everyone. In order to gain a sense of power in a world that was out of control, Gnostic groups developed rituals that projected their trauma into the astral world, where they healed ritually what they identified as the source of the world's problems, the debilitation of the human psyche and its incarceration in the legal system put into play by the Archons. They thought that the human psyche was locked in a state of forgetfulness, unable to recall where it had come from and what had happened to it before it was born. It did not remember that it contained God's DNA in the form of a pneumatic seed or a spark of light, that it was born from the transcendent God. In this state of ignorance, it had become egotistical and tyrannical, wanting to dominate and control others for its own satisfaction. It remained immature like a child, acting emotionally to fulfill its own desires. Lustful and sensual, it was preoccupied with sex. It was preoccupied with irrationality. It lived to lie and to deceive. It was bound to a legal system that was unfair and fraudulent, keeping it from journeying home and being at peace. The Gnostics taught remediation of the psyche through bodily practices like mindfulness, dispassionate behaviors, sexual abstinence, truth-telling, and unmerited charity, what they called grace. They were not about escaping the world, nor were they nihilists, but bodhisattvas. They were about giving life meaning by healing the world at each of the 7 levels, one soul at a time. Thank you. you want me to, sure.
Why don't we do, when we have time, we'll take audience questions. But keep in mind, tomorrow we're going to have the panel. So any questions you have or we can't get to you, save them for tomorrow. It'll be exciting. But a couple of questions before we get to the next speaker. Anybody have any? Mrs. Smalley?
Richard?
Yeah. What's the approximate date of the Bonner gem?
Yeah, we think it's about 3rd century. It could be 4th. The problem is, Richard, we don't know where it came from. It was not when that stuff was from Egypt, it wasn't often marked where like it came from such and such a tomb or what have you. So,
what was it made out of?
Jasper. Yeah, I should have mentioned this. So the original Jasper gem, what I projected there was a new photograph that I had Kelsey Museum take of the cast. So when the gem came in to the museum, they made a cast of it just so that they would always have a record of it. And the Jaspers disappeared. We've tried to trace it. We can't find it. We don't know who has it. Nobody's come forward, but we have the cast. So that's what I showed you there was the cast. Yeah.
Do you know when the sidereal and the tropical astrology split?
Oh boy.
And how does that affect our understanding of the Gnostics and their amazing path of like self-discovery? Like,
yeah, this has always bothered me even when we have like modern astrology does not align with ancient astrology. So I'm not sure how to bridge that. I'm not sure how to bridge it. I don't know the answer to it because the geocentric world is different from our world today. And so we've got the 12 and now Pluto isn't even in there. So I don't know how to bridge that gap, and others of you out here may have some ideas about that.
I was going to ask the volunteers that they use for the seal ritual and stuff. Do they not know what was in there?
They don't know that either. It's just described as a white oil.
Would they have possibly used a plant in some leaves?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that it was a plant. And my feeling on this, from what I've read in the ancient sources, is that their rituals involve psychedelics.
The seven.
Yeah, so I don't know what their drinking rituals at least were. I say that because Hippolytus gives us a pretty good understanding of Marcus's ritual, his drinking ritual, which involved when a certain cup was drunk, the person would immediately start perspiring and their heart rate would increase. I mean, you get they were imbibing something other than just alcohol. Yeah. Yeah.
I hope these questions are, to me, they're basic. I hope I'm not insulting by not, that I don't know the answers. So I'll just get them all out. So where was this group? Where were they living?
Yep.
What was their language? Was it all male or mixed, male and female? And what approximate years are we talking about?
Yeah, so we're in about 150. So we're in the middle of the 2nd century. We're in Egypt. Okay. This would have been a male-female group.
And they were speaking Egyptian?
Yeah, Egyptian. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Were they speaking Egyptian or Greek?
They were Egyptian. These were Egyptians.
Well, you said you translated.
Yeah, so origin is writing in Greek. Okay. A lot of of course, the Nag Hammadi texts were all translated into Coptic, which is an Egyptian language in Greek letters. And what is so interesting about the Coptic language is that phonetically what they did is they listened to the Egyptian people speak and they wrote the sounds down in Greek letters. That's Coptic. So these were Egyptians. Yeah. Yeah, in the back.
On the entrance and exit in the sabbatical cycle, I know there's Cancer and Capricorn.
Yep.
Is there any specificity, like a star or a region?
Some groups did, and this was not, I should also tell you, this was not the only path. So there were other groups. So the Paradics are interesting because they understand Venus to be the gate. So others, Leo. So like I said, these were trade secrets. This is just one path, and it just so happens to align with the Mithraic rites and also with Numenius. And that's how I was able to break the code on it, because I was able to, I figured that part out, which had not been done previously. Yeah.
With the prayers and like the tax codes to get different things, because I've discussed in the gospel that very badly.
Okay, good question. Mary Magdalene is one of these ascent texts that had these secrets in it. Unfortunately, we only have a very small part of that text, and we only have a few of the actual archons being identified with ignorance and so on and so forth. So we don't know the whole path there, but that is a similar text. Yeah, it was not Ophian though. That looks to be Valentinian. Yeah. Stephen?
Well, one of the things I had noticed from some of the studies I've been doing recently is that most of the conceptions of the gods in the Near East and the West and Antiquity, they usually had kind of a human form.
Right.
But the Egyptians were very unique in that they typically incorporated animals
right.
into this, and it seems like that was adopted by the Gnostics. Do you think that there's significance to the animal usage with the imagery and all this?
Do I think there's,
significance that because the Egyptians seem like this was like
I think that these guys were Egyptians. So I differ from a lot of scholars on that. I think that Gnosticism emerges out of Egyptian religion.
But what do you think that there's significance though to the use of the animals as the personifications of the gods in a lot of the Egyptian rite mythology versus the more kind of classical human forms that they would have in Greco-Roman mythology?
I'm not sure that I understand your question. So it's just common that in Egypt that that their gods were these extraordinary creatures. They were not humans. They were something else, right? Something other. And that's how these hybrid creatures is how they understood them. And
well, that's kind of like what I'm getting at. It just seems like the Egyptian gods were conceived as so, alien, for lack of a better term, in comparison to like the Greco-Roman ones, where they were much more kind of humanized when they presented them to the public or what have you.
Yeah, although the Greek gods still are associated with animals. So like the gods always have animal figures that are associated with them, like I tried to show in that one chart. And surprisingly, they're quite similar across So part of it also might have to do with astrology, in that they identified them with the constellations, which were, serpentine or what have you in their iconography. Yeah, I don't know any more significance than that I can say. Yeah.
Hey, we've got some dialogue in the chat room about the connection with Revelation and the Seven Seals to this too. So, is there anything you can tell us about that?
I might leave that for Chris.
Anything else in the chat, Val?
That's about it.
Well, thank you, everybody. You've been great.
Breaking free from Archon influence, revealing their secret weapon to control us. According to ancient Gnostic lore, the Archons are the ruling agents of the universe and brutal overlords of humanity. Unlike other celestial villains, the Archons aren't interested in eternal damnation or overthrowing some good principle. These omnipotent, thuggish beings are in charge, and that is it. Like traditional demons, they seduce humanity, but the whole mechanism of the cosmos is one big-ass seduction meant to keep the holy part of humans unaware of a higher destiny. Thus, what the Archons want the most in this universe is status quo. How exactly do the Archons seduce and keep us trapped in Maya? Keep the cosmic slaughterhouse factory going? One view is unique, but appropriate in a way any modern person can relate to the point of sharing it loudly in a support group. Let's find out before they hear us. Who exactly are the Archons? In a dictionary of Gnosticism, Andrew Philip Smith provides the definition of the Archons. In Gnostic systems, the Archons are the numerous assistants of the demiurge. They are usually responsible for the creation of the human body. Planetary Archons are also thought to rule over the various spheres through which the soul may ascend. The Archons have a negative role, restraining the spiritual impulses of humanity and directing human affairs for the demiurge, being responsible for the flood, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and the crucifixion of Jesus. Although depicted as hermaphrodite creatures owning bestial faces, with an appetite for rape and brawling, the Archons are essentially a mixture of heavenly administrators and hellish union goons. Their greatest tool isn't fear, however, but ignorance, the quote, mother of all evil, according to the Gnostic Gospel of Philip. If humans remain ignorant of their divine origins beyond the universe, the system remains constant, and all is kosher for the Archons. Except the system is, according to the Gnostics, a flawed construct. As Sam Criss wrote in The Atlantic, the physical universe was the creation of the demiurge, Samael or Yaldabaoth, sometimes figured as a snake with the head of a lion, a blind and stupid god who creates his false world in imperfect imitation of the real creator. The world is a distorted mirror, an image, in other words, a kind of software. In this flawed system, this software, the Archons are demented programmers, coding our fate, precisely every negative aspect of our lives, inner and outer, that slowly break our mental spine. They grant us the counterfeit spirit. It sucks. The method of the Archons. All of this brings us to the specific method the Archons likely use to keep us in abject ignorance, the opposite of liberating Gnosis. That is bureaucracy. Really bad bureaucracy. The Archon nature of being the bumbling administrators of the heavens is their greatest weapon. After all, as above, so below, said the Gnostic Hermeticists. While many faiths feel that a celestial bureaucracy is fantastic, from the Pythagoreans to Confucianism, the Gnostics, history's great anarchists, contended it was quite the opposite. The faulty, quote, software was, ironically, the perfect mechanism to keep us trapped in, as Philip K. Dick called the universe, the Black Iron Prison. It was death by 1,000 regulations, death by 1,000 frustrations. In the novel Good Omens, written by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman, a demon, appropriately named Crawley, proves that the Archon way is superior in the fight against heaven. He demonstrates that traffic jams and phone service outages are far more efficient in damning souls than such common demonic methods as possession or temptation. Death by 1,000 frustrations is the best way to dim the human spirit. Ponder this. As humans, we are basically prepared to deal with and overcome life's significant challenges, from a family death to a nearby war, and thus infinity is part of our vibe. It's the little shit in life that seems to get us. Imagine going through a day when the car won't start. You seem to catch every bloody red light. You need 5 departments at work to sign off on your order for printer cartridges. The customer service representative of your online order is oblivious after you spend an hour trying to connect. Like Morpheus said in The Matrix, it's like a splinter in your mind driving you mad. And these events just don't seem at all like an accident. Between bureaucracy and a faulty system, you can feel your soul dimming, your mind numbing, and your heroic side perishing. You become forgetful and anxious, a Stockholm Syndrome victim to a passive-aggressive kismet. Think of the works of Franz Kafka. Think of Terry Gilliam's Brazil. Think of the next time you have a good idea at work. Think of negotiating with the IRS, experiencing Microsoft updates, or family holiday parties where being comfortably numb is truly the closest you feel to heaven. It's not truly heaven, but that's the game the Archons play. Anyone can get used to fire after 1 billion years in hell. Anyone can get comfortable with extinction in a Richard Dawkins paradigm. But not even Buddha can handle the local DMV. Like Lao Tzu said, the more laws and order are made prominent, the more thieves and robbers there will be. In an Archon-ruled universe, we are all outlaws who don't even know it, sinking in ignorance by every Mercury retrograde and iPhone upgrade. We are the frogs in the boiling waters of Lethe. How do we fight the Archons? We fight the Archons like the ancient Gnostics did, with knowledge, wisdom, and detachment. To be in the world and not of it, as Jesus explains in the Gospel of John, or as Paul says in Romans 12, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Thus, in a higher mind, in a hermetic sense, don't let them control your mind like most of humanity. As Nicola Denze Lewis writes in her book, Introduction to Gnosticism, the Archons, quote, transcend category, which in the thought world of antiquity was not a good thing. She also writes that they are neither, quote, divine nor clearly demonic. After arming ourselves with the right data to see beyond the software, we must beat the Archons at their game by transcending human categories, becoming neither divine nor clearly demonic. Awaken the essence of Sophia and the alien god that resides within us, sometimes known as the divine spark. The Gnostics utilize many rituals to achieve this, so your mileage may vary. Ultimately, it's about breaking fate, knowing that the Archons truly own our body, that we only rent at a high interest rate, and that our thoughts can become free with the right information.